Let's welcome Congressman Stewart to the House of Representatives.
Thank you.
Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, please. You all always do that, and it always embarrasses me, so thank you. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the invitation. And we offered to the Speaker to not come and talk to you in session, but maybe at another setting in caucus or something, but you extended the invitation once again, and we're grateful for that. And I want you to know that I'm respectful of your time, and I recognize you're doing the people's work, and I follow you every day on what you're doing, and I know how busy you are. And I want to be brief, and I want you to know as well that I spend quite a lot of time preparing my remarks to you. Partly because so many of you become such good friends and people that I respect, and partly is just out of respect again for your time. So my approach is a little bit like this. Julius Caesar was a great warrior, and he won many battles, but he loved to give long speeches, so they killed him. And don't want to be Julius Caesar today. But I do want to share some thoughts with you, as the speaker said, a report from Washington. But I want to set the table on that before I do, and then be interested if you have any questions or comments from you. I recently returned from an overseas trip to Russia, and when I came back, someone asked me, a media person asked me, what do you think is the greatest danger that we face? You know, is it Russia? Is it China? Is it, the mullahs in Iran and nuclear proliferation, or a long list of things? And without thinking about it, I said, I think the greatest danger we face is that there is no longer accepted truth in the world. And the people are looking and stumbling from really deception to deception. And I said, without that foundation, it is very, very difficult to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. We live in a time of great agitation, of great emotion, and that leads to great uncertainty. We live in a time when many people mistake the depth of their feelings for being right. We live in a time of fake news. And many times the accusers of fake news are often the purveyors of fake news as well. And I think, and I know this will be noted in the media itself, but I just think, frankly, the responsible media has lost its mind on some things. And we see it again and again. We live in a time where people attribute ill will when there really was none intended. When we're all Americans, and most are really trying to do the right thing for their country. And to be fair, leading to some of this is we live in a time when we have a president who has chosen to communicate in a different way to the American people. He chooses to communicate more directly. And honestly, he says some things that take us back, and that, in my opinion, don't reflect the dignity of the office of the presidency. There are demonstrations all the time in Washington, D.C. Nearly every day I walk through a demonstration. I walked through a large demonstration some time ago, and I got kind of swept up in it, and I ended up talking with some of the folks. And as I talked to them, I asked, why are you here? And there were lots of reasons. I mean, there were as many reasons nearly as there were people there. But at the end of the day, it really came down to this. They were there because they were angry. They were angry at the election. They were angry at the direction that the nation is coming. They were concerned about some of the things that were important to them. I said in an interview last week and asked about the demonstrations on the immigration policy, which is controversial. I get that. But I made the point, and that is, if you want to demonstrate, God bless you. That's the American way. Go out and demonstrate. But our democracy is based not on demonstrations. It's based on elections. And if you want to make the argument to a machinist in Michigan or a farmer in Iowa that, for example, open borders with Syria are a good idea, then go make that argument. I don't think many will accept that. But you make that argument again through the electoral process, through elections, through choosing leaders. And I'm happy to see these demonstrations as people express their will and their thoughts. But as a people, we don't govern by that. We govern by elections. And so I would ask then, what are some things that we think we can do to kind of help us through these, very tumultuous times? I'm going to suggest 4 things, and then I'll end. And some of them are very obvious, and they're things that I know that you do and understand. But I think they're worth remembering. The first thing I think that we should do is be gracious. To remember that, again, we are all Americans. and that when someone disagrees with you, it's not necessarily out of ill will or they don't have ill intent for our country. For those of us who are Republicans, we remember that many of us felt like it was the end of the world when Barack Obama was reelected and that he was implementing policies we didn't agree with. And I had to remind my Republican friends and my own family sometimes, this isn't the end of the world. We'll get through this. Political activities will swing and the politics will change, and our country is stronger than this. I would remind my Democratic colleagues the same thing now. It's not the end of the world, and we will get through this. The second thing is we have a responsibility to listen, and to listen respectfully. I feel that's a great responsibility that I have, to listen to my constituents. At the end of the day, there may not change my mind. We may agree to disagree. It's, if you've thought through these policies, it's not generally that one conversation makes you rethink a lifetime worth of consideration. But even that may be the case, I still feel a responsibility to listen to them and give them an opportunity to express their view. We live in a time, as I said, when truth is hard to find, and that being the case, we have a responsibility to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable for us. And so I think I have a responsibility when my leaders may say something that I disagree with to indicate that I disagree with that and why. So, for example, a few days ago I was on a media interview and they asked me, well, what do you think about Mr. Trump and the comments he made that appeared to compare the KGB thug and the murder of Vladimir Putin as a moral equivalency to the United States? And I felt the responsibility at that time to indicate I think that's nuts. There is no moral equivalency. And the United States is a shining light upon the hill, for heaven's sakes. We have been for 200 years. And we, as a Republican, you don't want to, and you don't look for opportunities to criticize your own leadership. But on the other hand, we have a responsibility to be honest and to tell the truth. And the last thing I'll say then is this. We have an obligation, I feel like it's a moral duty, to at the end of the day and after listening and being gracious and considering doing what I think is the right thing for our country. And so you recognize that people are angry and they're demonstrating. You try to consider why. We look at some of the things in the media and you say, okay, well, they're trying to persuade us in one direction, but why? But at the end of the day, you got to do what you think is right. And so that is why we will do meaningful tax reform. And it will be difficult. But the economic output from that, the economic explosion that will come from getting rid of a horribly inefficient tax system, will help Americans and better their lives. We will repeal and then replace the Affordable Care Act. It has hurt millions of Americans. It has hurt tens of thousands of Utahns. Many of them I've had the opportunity to talk with. We'll protect those who have pre-existing conditions. We'll allow your children to stay on your policy till they're 26, which, by the way, was a Republican idea. We will provide for access, but we can do it in a way that doesn't rip the heart out of what was the best health care system in the world. Regulatory reform. Oh my heavens, it's $1.6 trillion annual deficit budget or burden on our economy. And you've already seen the outcome from having just the promise of a reduced regulatory environment. As companies have said, we'll stay here in America. If you'll reduce the regulatory burden, we'll stay here in America instead of going overseas. And finally, and I'll conclude with this, we have the responsibility to protect Americans and America's interest overseas. We live in a dangerous world. And though there are many who would destroy us if they could. Next week, my youngest daughter is getting married. A few hours after her wedding, I'm going to leave for a trip overseas to just a real garden spot, I can promise you. Just a really nasty part of the world. But the reason we do that is because we have to go to those parts of the world to formulate policies that will protect us. The last 8 years have left the world a much darker and a much more dangerous place. We have created a military that is not as capable as they should be to protect Americans. And I hear all the time when I'm overseas, where is America? We don't know if we can count on you anymore. We don't know if you will stand by us anymore. As a more personal example, when I was in the Air Force, we had something like 157 fighter squadrons. We've got 53 today. And too many of them are not even combat capable. We have to be able to protect America's interest around the world. And that's going to take some time and some effort. And let me close by saying this. Abraham Lincoln called America the last best hope on earth. I have on my wall in Washington, I'm having it framed now, the speech where he gave that with that segment underlined, the last best hope on earth. It was true when he said it. It's still true today. The challenge we have is to make sure that our children can teach that to their children and have it be true for that future generation. We can't leave our world where freedom was just some whisper from the past. We have to give them the same blessings, the same opportunities that our forebears gave to us. That is a challenge we have, the fight we have. God bless you in the work that you do, hoping to accomplish that. God bless those of us in Washington who are trying to do the same thing. And finally, as always, God bless the United States of America. Thank you for letting me spend a few minutes with you today.